With the recent passing of Pope Francis and the election of a new pope, non-Catholics are more than ever looking at this institution and wondering, where did this all come from? You might be thinking this started somewhere in medieval Europe or with the Roman emperors, but it's way crazier than that. What if I told you the Pope was really in the Bible this whole time and was given to us by Jesus? We read in Matthew 16 that Jesus promised to build his church. But what does this church look like? It might have something to do with the rest of this conversation with Simon Peter. But in order to really understand what's going on, let's take a closer look at just who this Simon Peter guy is. The first thing to note is his name. When Jesus first meets him, he says, "So you are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which means Peter. So we read that his name was Simon, but Jesus changes his name to Cephas, or Kepha, the Aramaic word for rock. You can translate that to Petros, Peter, Pedro, Pierre, but if you want to know the actual name Jesus gave him, it's Cephas, and the definition of that name is rock. Why does any of this matter? In the Bible, every time God changes someone's name, it corresponds to a new mission. For example, God changes Abram's name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations. So what new mission did Jesus give Simon the Rock? If we look at Luke 22, the disciples are arguing among themselves which one is the greatest. And this is the third time now. I feel like Jesus really needs to step in and settle this. So what does Jesus do? He starts by explaining to them what good leadership looks like and to follow his example. He then assures them that all 12 of them will have some kind of authority. He then goes on to say, "Simon, Simon, listen, Satan has demanded to sift all of you like wheat." Well, that sounds pretty scary. Good thing Jesus is God. He could stop Satan, right? "But I have prayed for you that your own faith may not fail, and you, once you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." Wait, what? If Satan is after Jesus' disciples, why doesn't he stop him? Or at least pray for all 12 of them? He seems to be putting a lot of pressure on Peter. So what else can we learn about Peter's role? Are we just reading our own interpretation back into the text? Well, even the gospel writers seem to think Peter's a big deal. In all the lists of the 12, Peter's always listed first, and Judas is always listed last. What's more, even the Greek word translated first means highest in rank, not first in a list. And speaking of Peter among the other disciples, he's named in the Gospels more than all the other disciples combined. All of this is pretty cool, but what does it have to do with the office of Pope? Well, now let's take a look back at Matthew 16. Jesus asks his disciples who people say he is, and they give him some different answers. He then asks, "But who do you say that I am?" Interestingly enough, Simon Peter seems to answer for the whole group. "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." So we see Simon's name being changed to Rock, and Jesus says he will build his church on this rock. As we mentioned before, changing someone's name implies a new mission. And Peter, he's given the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever he binds on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever he looses on earth, well, that will be loosed in heaven. But what is Jesus talking about here? Well, we read in the Old Testament, when God appoints a new chief steward, that's the person who can act on behalf of the king, he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David, and he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. So Jesus is making a reference to giving someone authority in a kingdom, a figure who will be called a father to the people. By the way, the word pope comes from the Latin word meaning father, and he entrusts this role in his church to Peter. But are Catholics just making up this Peter the leader business and finding parallels wherever they can to justify this move? What if I told you that Peter acts consistently as the leader throughout the New Testament? In Acts 1, Peter leads the selection of Judas's replacement. In Acts 2, he gives the first public sermon at Pentecost. In Acts 10, he receives the revelation that the gospel is for the Gentiles. And in Acts 15, at the Council of Jerusalem, he settles the dispute over circumcision. Even Paul, who was commissioned by Jesus, went to Peter early in his ministry to confirm what he was preaching. Since Peter, there has been an unbroken chain of successors to this office, leading and guiding the church to this day. If you'd like to learn more about that church, you can click here. I'm a mother-loving Christian. Thanks for watching.